What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jordan, and today we're going to be talking about starting your very own car project. On my Instagram, I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of you guys, and I get some common repeating questions, and one of the ones that I've heard a lot recently is, hey, I just got my car project, I'm really excited, and I know that there is so much to do, and I have no idea where to start. So I wanted to make a video to kind of summarize some of the things that I've learned when restoring my Datsun 280Z, and really a lot of this stuff can apply to just about any car project there is. So I hope you guys enjoy, and let's get into it. And so the first thing that I want to talk about is that moment when you first get your project, because you have basically two routes to go. You can decide to restore your car and drive it the entire time that you're working on it and owning it, or you can decide to just take everything off, put it on jack stands, and hope and pray that you're going to keep the motivation up while you build the car. And to be truthful, I think a lot of people kind of do number two, and they just like tear it all apart and put it on jack stands, and then they get discouraged. And I knew that that was a possibility with this car. So with my build in particular, I decided to kind of maybe do things 2 times over throughout the whole process of the build on some pieces. But I did get to drive the car the entire time that I've been working on it, and I think that's a huge piece of owning one of these things and having a car project. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, and yeah, let's get started. There's a lot to go over. Now, before I decided to make this video, I wanted to really get my thoughts together because there's a lot that goes into a car project. And I think it makes the most sense to split your restoration, your whole car project, up into 3 phases. The first phase is going to be your repair phase. The second phase is going to be your restoration phase. And then the third phase is going to be your improvement phase. So what does all that mean? The first phase, which is going to be the repair phase, that basically is you repairing the things that need to get done right now. The things that are going to make this car safe, reliable, and something that you can drive around and really not worry about it too much. I think when people first get their car, a lot of things that other people do are not safe. And so the last thing you want to do is buy your car on Craigslist, go up to the canyons, and just drive as fast as possible, because there's a lot that can go wrong on these old cars. So that phase is really important. Next, I want to talk about the restoration phase. And the restoration phase is basically giving you a fantastic foundation for serious modification and doing exactly what you want to do with the build. But the thing is, there's a lot of jobs in between the beginning of the project and the end of the project when you get to do the things that you really, really love. After that, which is the part that everyone is going to be most excited about, is the improvement phase. This is when you get to spend the big bucks and buy the fast engines and the really good parts that make your car exciting. And so I think people usually get stuck somewhere in the restoration phase, phase 2, because there is a lot of not fun projects in the restoration phase, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So let's dive right into the repair phase and go over the things that you need to do right away. The repair phase is one that I want to split up in 2 different sections. One being the safety repairs and the next being the longevity repairs. Because remember, we're going to be repairing this car and driving it at the same time. So we need to be looking out for the health of the entire car throughout the project. So talking about the safety repairs first, this is going to include things like fuel leaks. The fuel system in these old cars, the rubber lines, they start cracking and making a mess. You start leaking fuel around. Your gas tank might have rust in it or rust holes, if it's really, really bad. So really addressing every fuel leak in the system is going to be important. So you can go ahead right from this step and make your fuel system awesome. You can get a new pump, clean out your gas tank, wire wheel your gas tank, new lines, AN lines, new injectors. You can really do the whole deal. And really, I would advise that. I would advise kind of just revamping the whole fuel system. After that, you're going to want to do the brake system. Stopping is ultra important when you have an old car. So you're going to want to replace the pads, the discs, the drums, change the fluid in the brake system, change the soft lines in the brake system. So that's going to give you a safe braking system. And then if you want to go ahead and just upgrade all the way and buy big brake kit system, you can do that here, or you can just save some money and restore the stock system, because the stock system is going to work pretty good. Next, you're going to want to address your outer tie rod ends and your steering rack refurbishment, your steering rack mounts, everything to do with your steering. The outer tie rod ends usually go bad because they have a ball joint in there. Every car is a little bit different, but basically where your steering rack attaches to your hub of your wheel, everything needs to be working properly, because you don't want to hit a bump and have some crazy bump steer if something's messed up, or you don't want the socket joint, the ball and socket joint to pop out or anything like that. So your steering system needs to be completely refurbished and everything needs to be looked after. Maybe this means changing the bushings that are holding down your steering column or your steering rack and your steering column. And this is going to give you both improvements in safety, but also driving feel. You always hear people talking about project cars having like on center steering. There's like nothing happening. So you turn the wheel 10 or 15 degrees and the car doesn't go anywhere. That's because there's slack in the system. And it's because they haven't addressed all of the little things that need to be addressed. After that, you're going to want to check your seatbelt condition and the condition of your driver's seat and the mounts of that seat. Because a lot of times in these old cars, the floor pans might start rusting and the bolts might start rusting, and sometimes they're not really anchored down in the car. I know in this car when we got it, the driver's seat had like stripped threads holding down the driver's seat, and we needed to get that addressed right away, because if you get in an accident or something, the last thing you want is for your seat to come undone and you're just flying around the cabin with the seat. So that's a safety issue and we need to address that. And something that gets neglected at the beginning of a car project is the tires. Sometimes these cars are sitting around for 10, 15 years and people don't replace the tires right away. But, unfortunately, this is kind of like an expensive project to replace the tires, but you really need to, because after 5 or 10 years, the tires get hard and you lose the grip and they have the potential to burst. And really, that's going to be one of the biggest performance increases in this safety phase is new tires. And after that, you want to make sure all your lights and your indicators work. Obviously, this is important for your brake lights. People need to know when you're stopping, but also your headlights if you get caught driving around at nighttime. Indicators is something you can kind of put off because you can do like different hand signals, which you can research if you want to check that out. But that's what I did when I first got the car. I was like, okay, there's a cop around, time to use my signals. But when there's no cops around, just watch out and drive safe. After you've gotten the safety repairs out of the way, we're going to start focusing on the longevity repairs. And the goal of the longevity repairs is to make sure that your car is going to be running good throughout all the other things that you're going to be doing. And this whole guide and this plan, there's a lot of opportunity to customize it. If there's something you really want to address early, something that's going to be exciting for you, that's fine. And having this longevity system in place so that your car is going to be running well is going to allow you to drive and make these small adjustments before you get too deep into the project. So as far as longevity goes, I think some of the very first thing you need to address is your vacuum lines. If you don't know what vacuum lines is, go ahead and look up some stuff on it. But basically, there's a bunch of plastic tubes that go through the car and go through the engine bay, and it helps run a lot of things in these old mechanical cars. And the vacuum line, if there's leaks in them, the car can be running lean, or it just kind of messes up the way the car runs. And this is a really easy thing to fix. You just literally go to AutoZone, measure your lines, or even have them measure them. In AutoZone, they have like every size available, and it's all in rolls, and they literally can just snip you off however much you need. Go spend $75 or whatever and get way more vacuum line than you need, and just replace every vacuum line you can. It's going to be a really easy fix, and sometimes it can make your car run a whole lot better. Next, you're going to want to change and flush every single fluid. You've already done this with the brakes, maybe you've already changed that, but you still have the engine oil, you have the transmission oil. If you're feeling adventurous, you can do the diff fluid, the coolant. The coolant's going to be really important because over time, the coolant in these iron heads, it rusts, and the coolant really just doesn't look fantastic. So doing that and addressing some things in the coolant system might be a good idea. Next, you're going to want a new battery, and I know this is going to be like, duh, but you might not have thought of it, and it really sucks to have your car die in the wintertime, so get a new battery and make sure that your car is going to turn on every time that you want it to. Next, you're going to want to address the gas tank and fuel system. We already talked about that, but maybe you didn't do the whole thing. This is a really good opportunity to drop the fuel tank, clean it out, get rid of any rust, make sure that the fuel tank is solid, get out any big dents that might be in the fuel tank. I still need to do that on this one. I kind of glazed over that. But yeah, really, this is going to be the start of some of the major restoration that's coming up soon. So you're going to want to start looking at the ignition system, whether that's, getting a new OEM distributor cap or new ignition coil, new spark plugs, spark plug wires. I actually have some pretty good tutorials about how to do that on my channel if you want to check it out. After that, you're going to want to get an engine tune. I know a car like this, the Datsun 280Z, it has a pretty primitive ECU or engine control unit for the car. And so getting your car tuned, if it has carbs or something, can be really a big pain in the butt. You might want to take that to a shop. But if you want to research it and check out how to do it yourself, I mean, there's definitely a lot of resources out there to do it. But tuning your engine is going to, give you more power. It's going to make your car more fuel efficient. If you need to pass smog, that might be important. I try and pass smog every year. But really, you want to make sure your car is tuned so that it doesn't run lean. Basically, when it runs lean, it means that it has too much air going into the system, not enough gas, and it makes the car run hotter. There's the potential for detonation inside the cylinders. So getting your engine tuned is really important for longevity because you want your car to continue to run well. On the detonation issue, sometimes for these old cars, you can just go ahead and use 91 octane or 93, whatever is local to you. That will help reduce some of the knock and some of the potential detonation. But getting your car tuned is going to be important. Not necessarily tuned to get the most power out of it, but just tuned to work well. Last thing, and one of the bigger and expensive projects of this little phase is going to be clutch service and clutch slave cylinder service. The clutch is going to be a big job. You've got to take the transmission out and you got to change the clutch. So you may want to hire a shop to do that because if you don't have all the tools necessary, it can be kind of dangerous to move around the big heavy transmission. But this is not totally required. I mean, if your clutch is working fine, you can just kind of let that go, whatever. And if you do decide to do the clutch, you can also change the flywheel and make the flywheel lighter. So there's options there for making the car a little bit more peppy and exciting. But yeah, I think that is it for longevity. And now we're going to be moving on to the restoration phase. The restoration phase is going to be probably the most difficult part of this project, mainly because there's a lot to do. And also there is going to be some downtime with your car. You're going to need to put it on jack stands for at least a little bit. So maybe there's an opportunity for you to really put a lot of work in a short amount of time if you want to continue to drive the car or take some time off work or hire some help or get a trusted shop to do some of this work or all of it. But let's just dive right into the restoration phase. Step 1 is going to be structural rust repair. These old cars, they have a lot of rust. I know this car, when we first got it, it needed new frame rails, so the rust was pretty bad on those. And some of this structural rust repair can actually give you performance in the car as well. It's not just like fixing things. Because I know that when we changed the frame rails in this car and fixed a few other things, the car actually felt stiffer. So going over speed bumps and stuff, I had more confidence. There wasn't so much creaking and weird noises. So this can also just be an improvement in the driving experience, not just something expensive that you have to do. Unfortunately, rust repair, if you hire someone to do it, is pretty dang expensive. I took up welding several years after we paid for it, but anyway, you might want to hire somebody to do that. Next, this is where things get a little bit more serious. We're going to get some jack stands, put the car up in the air as high as you can, and take everything off the bottom of the car. Everything. The suspension, the brakes, the drive shaft, the differential, the gas tank, literally everything that's on the bottom of the car, you can take off. Some of the stuff like the fuel lines and the brake lines, you can kind of just leave up there, the little things. But basically what we're about to do is we're about to remove all the old undercoating, prep the under part of the car to protect it from rust, and putting new undercoating on the bottom of the car. This is a really big and dirty project, and it is one that you need to really brace yourself for because your garage is going to be an absolute disaster. But it's so worth it because when you get everything cleaned up and you spray that anti-rust paint on there and then you put undercoating on the bottom of the car, it looks so clean, and it really is one of the first steps in the project where you're like, wow, the car is looking a little bit new. And I think that's a really cool step. I use the Eastwood rubberized undercoating, and I just have to say that I didn't really like it. I wouldn't do it again. So do your research, figure out what kind of Raptor liner or bed liner, whatever you want to use on the underside of the car. But I just wasn't a fan of the Eastwood rubberized undercoating. I haven't taken it off, but I wouldn't do it again. It never really dried in some areas, and it's kind of goopy. It's not what I envisioned. It also doesn't have very many like insulation properties to it. So I don't know why I decided to do that. And now that you have the entire underside of the car clean and all the suspension is off the car and it's on the floor, it's laid out, it's everywhere all over your garage, you need to remove all the original bushings in the suspension. So the suspension has a bunch of rubber bushings that are inside the different parts of the suspension. And this can be a really big, annoying task to get them out. So basically, you can hire a shop to get them out, but I mean, you can do it with some elbow grease. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of research on your part to kind of figure out where those bushings are and then buy a new bushing kit and all that stuff. But go ahead and buy your new bushing kit. But before you do that, you're going to want to take all of those suspension parts that you just removed the bushings from, and you're going to want to get those powder coated. You get them totally looking awesome. You can take them to a powder coating shop. They're going to sandblast them, clean them up, and when you get them back from the powder coater, it's going to be like brand new parts. It's going to be crazy. You're going to have a 40-year-old car with brand new suspension parts, and then from that point forward, you're going to be taking the new bushings, putting them in the new suspension, and putting them back in the car. But before we go any further, you're going to have to take out the differential and all of the shafts. So that means the half shafts and the drive shaft, depending on what car you have. But this one has two half shafts and one drive shaft. And you're going to want to either clean up all of this stuff and re-grease the U-joints, or you can just take it to a shop to get refurbished. I mean, while it's out of the car, you might as well take it to a shop. One thing I would advise is, one, do not buy a cheap differential from Amazon. I made that mistake once, and it actually cost me like $500 more to get that cheap differential fixed than it was if I just bought like a top-of-the-line differential and put it in the stock case. So lesson learned, don't buy cheap differentials, get the good stuff if you want to get a limited slip differential. Mine is working just fine, but it was a little bit of an expensive thing. Once you receive all of your suspension and your hubs back from the powder coater, obviously we just talked about putting the suspension back in the car, but then we also have your hubs. And the hubs are basically the things in the middle of the wheel that is not the brake discs and is not the wheel itself. It's the thing that holds all that stuff together. And essentially, the hubs need new bearings because the hub is basically where either the half shaft goes through or just the wheel spins on the bearings in the hubs. So that's a little bit of a learning curve to try and figure out how to press in new bearings and remove and pack grease in bearings. That was actually kind of like a fun project. I thought that was kind of fun to learn, but it's definitely a little bit messy and it can be a little bit tedious. After your hubs are restored and ready to go back in there, you can just put the hubs back in and then put your coilovers back in there or whatever is going to be your new suspension parts. I definitely would suggest getting new dampers and springs because those things are going to be absolutely completely shot after 30 or 40 years of these cars driving around or sitting in a grass lot. But yeah, coilovers is going to be great. This is your opportunity as well to put in a new big brake kit. And, maybe you did that earlier. You don't need to do that step now. But this is when I put my big brake kit on the car. And it's such a cool sight to see your car with a clean underside, brand new powder coated suspension parts, new coilovers, new big brake kit. This is really, for a lot of people, going to be the turning point of like, oh my gosh, my car is, it's starting to be kind of cool. This is a good thing. This is a good opportunity as well to get new rims and new tires. You may have already done this in the first step, but generally, if you don't know what your suspension setup is going to be, it might be kind of hard to estimate what wheels you want to use. So basically, we did the suspension. We figured out, okay, how much space do we have inside the wheel wells here? So what wheels are we going to get? What tires can we fit? And all of that. I did kind of roll the fenders to fit some of these tires, only in the back though. The back needed a little bit of rolling, but the front didn't. So that's going to be a fun project because putting the rims on the car is a huge milestone and that feels really, really good. And last, you're going to want to do the exhaust system. And there's a lot of options for exhaust system, and obviously the exhaust system is something that you can change over time. This is something that is flexible and fluid, but I took this opportunity to put a new exhaust on this car when I was at this phase in the project. And this is also just one more kick in the pants for motivation to get the project done because you turn it on, it sounds awesome. That's what we love. So I definitely would advise doing the exhaust. And the last part of the restoration phase is going to be getting an alignment. These cars, once you replace all the suspension, put new coilovers on there, fix the bump steer, put your rims on there, you need to get the car aligned. And I wouldn't advise doing it for the first time in your garage because a really good alignment can make a car feel really, really amazing. But a DIY, maybe not so good alignment can really actually cause quite a few problems. I tried to do the alignment myself in the garage, and then I went driving out in the rain, and the car was crab walking all over the road, which maybe you don't know what that means, but basically it means the car is like uncontrollable in unpredictable conditions. So getting in alignment is one, a good thing to do, but it's also another safety thing. So getting in alignment will be important. What's really cool about finishing up the restoration phase is that you can basically drive your car after the restoration phase is done, just the way it is forever. You can just keep the car exactly the way it is because it runs well, the engine is healthy, it's tuned, the suspension is set up nice, the brakes are working well, and the brakes are really good. You, at this point, probably still have the stock interior in the car. So this is just a phase of the project where if you decide you don't want to be emptying your bank account anymore, you can just stick with this part of the project forever, and you can just drive the car like this forever. A lot of people, don't stop at this part, but actually this is kind of more or less where this car has been for the last couple of years because, a lot of these big car projects are expensive. So, I'm saving up money to get the paint done. I'm saving up money to get the engine rebuilt. And so this is a really great stopping point for just, pushing really hard for the project. You can take this opportunity to also, do some exterior modifications, whether you want to put some bumpers in the car, which is one thing I did, maybe put a new front lip or front valence in the car, or a spare wing, or a new spoiler. So this is a really cool step in the project where you can kind of just sit back, relax, and be like, all right, I've done a lot of stuff. Now I can just enjoy my car. I know it's safe. I know it's put together well. And this is a really great step. However, now we're going to move into the improvement phase. And the improvement phase is basically where a lot of your creativity is going to come out in the build. What do you want for this build? Do you want it to be like a hardcore race car? Do you want it to be a Grand Tour? What do you envision this project to be? And for me, the first thing was comfort. I really wanted this car that now it's driving well and it's healthy as far as like the motor and everything. I wanted the car to be comfortable. I wanted my friends and family to be able to ride with me in the car and feel like they're in a nice thing and feel like they can enjoy riding with you, even if they're not in the car with you all the time. It's always cool to maybe be like, hey, you want to go for a ride? And we'll go drive around. And so for me, that was going to be air conditioning, new steering wheel and pedals, because the things that you use to drive are really important, especially in a sports car. If your car project is your first sports car, you may not understand that, but basically having a good steering wheel, having a good shift knob and pedals is really gonna just make you feel like you're driving more quality experience, and I think that's important. Next for me was gonna be sound deadening. I ripped out the interior almost completely, just all DIY, and just did as much restoration as I could of the interior of the car, and also trying to make it as quiet and as comfortable as I could with sound deadening. Some people will tell you that sound deadening weighs a whole lot, but I mean, it's really not that much. So don't be afraid to put 40 to 50 pounds of sound deadening in the car, because it really is going to make a big difference. And when you spent all these years and all the money building your car, you really want it to be comfortable and sound good on the inside. You don't want it to be like rattling and making all these noises, and when you go over a speed bump, it feels like it's about to fall apart, because we're really used to new cars being quiet and really, really refined. And when you jump in these 30 or 40-year-old cars, they're not always perfect, So for me, sound deadening was really important. Next, you're going to want to address any window or door seal issues. So the rubber that goes around the doors and the windows, you want to have all the wind sealed out. That way, when you're on the highway, you're not hearing, gusts of wind through your doors, and it makes it so when you close the door, it sounds solid and it sounds like it's working well. There's also an opportunity to do the seals for things like the hood or the trunk or whatever, but basically any of the rubber seals is going to be an important next step. And then last, as far as comfort goes, is going to be a full interior kit or a sound system. And initially, before I did the interior or had the interior done professionally by a shop, they did a super, super incredible job. I actually bought a carpet kit, and I bought one that was pre-molded. And a pre-molded kit, it really just didn't really work that well. So if you're going to buy a carpet kit, I would say don't buy the pre-molded kit. Just get the one that has just the carpet, and then you can always glue down the carpet. You can take your time doing it. But if it's pre-molded, if their mold for the floor pans or whatever is like not perfect, it's not going to sit in there very well. And then very, very last for the improvement phase of comfort is going to be the sound system. This is optional. Obviously, I mean, I like having a nice radio and nice speakers and all that stuff, but I didn't decide to do like a really heavy sound system in this car. Just, you know, something that makes it so you can hear it, and, you know, you gotta love music, right? Somewhere within the improvement phase, you're going to want to start ordering exterior modifications, because we're getting to the point at the very, very end of the project where you're going to be doing body work and paint. And the thing is, when you're doing body work and paint, there's going to come a point where you really can't change things like the mirrors. You can't really add bumpers and you know, front lips and stuff, because then you're going to be ruining this super expensive paint job that you just put on the car. So start ordering some of the difficult to get exterior modifications, like things like really rare badges for the car. Like, oh, I don't have a badge there. Like if you have like these bumpers took me like 18 months to get. Just crazy. They come from overseas. And yeah, so some of these parts that you can get for these old cars are really, really hard to find. And so those are the things that you're going to want to order within the improvement phase, and really get them ordered early. So that way, as they start coming in, you're not going to have a beautifully painted car, but no bumpers. Somewhere within the improvement phase or even the restoration phase, you could do a paint correction. And this is a really good DIY project. All you do is just get, you know, a polisher, and, you know, there's a million tutorials. I even basically made one. So go check out a tutorial for, you know, paint correction and ceramic coatings, because if you have a car that has pretty decent paint, it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, a buff and a ceramic coating can really make it look almost brand new. So that's great. And some of the last pieces of the improvement phase, guys, we're getting to the end of the project. I know we've talked about a lot of things, but the very end of the improvement phase is going to be things like modernizing all of the wiring, modernizing the intake system, modernizing the ECU system, the engine control unit. Modern cars have a lot of sensors that old cars don't have. So basically, once you get to a point where the car runs well, there is kind of a crossroads where it's like, do I just keep it stock, or do I kind of improve it and make it more of a modern, you know, sports car? And so that might be a route that you want to take, but it is a big, expensive project. And you may want to do an engine build. You may want to get, you know, forged internals, or maybe you want to convert to turbocharging. There's a lot of options for these cars, as well as all the other projects in the world. But basically, you want to get the engine built before you do the paint job. You know, of course, you can always do this stuff however you want, but essentially, if you take the engine out when the paint is already done, and you pose the risk of scratching the engine bay or messing up, you know, the front cowl or whatever. So basically, the goal is that you want to have the car entirely completed, all the way 100% done, before you do the paint, because the paint is going to be basically where it's like the cherry on top. Like, okay, my car project's done, and you can just drive it forever. And so, you know how you see those guys who are like professionals online, and they finish the project from the beginning? They just tear it all apart, put it on jack stands, and within 3 weeks or a month, the car's finished and it's beautiful. The reason why they can do that stuff is because they've already learned all the things that I've talked about in this video. So they know what to plan for, they know what is coming up. But when you have your very first project and you're learning as you go, there's a lot to do, and you need to learn those things before you decide to take off, you know, more than you can chew and trying to restore the entire project in a 6-month period. It's just really not that realistic, and the goal is to restore these cars, drive these cars, and enjoy them throughout the whole ownership process. So guys, that is basically my summary of how you are supposed to restore a car. Obviously, there's going to be a million different variables with every project, and everyone's going to have their own opinion of the things that they think are important for their project. And this is what I thought was important for my project. And I hope that maybe going through this kind of gave some of you some clarity on like where to start with your project. Or if you're stuck somewhere in the middle and you're just not sure what to do next, hopefully this list can kind of help you out. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed my little rundown. And if you've seen more than one of my videos, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you back. If you like this one and it helped you out, go ahead and hit that like button. But otherwise, guys, thanks for listening to me ramble all this time. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you later.